Over the coming months, more of our troops will come home. This winter, our troop levels in Afghanistan will be down to 34,000. And by this time next year, the transition to Afghan-led security will be nearly complete. The longest war in American history will end.
Indeed, the impending departure of U.S. troops is leading to heavier casualties among the Afghan National Security Forces, just one of the many consequences of the scheduled U.S. withdrawal in 2014. But it won't just be soldiers leaving the country. The U.S. war effort brought with it plenty of foreign aid, which quadrupled Afghanistan's GDP from 2001 to 2010. $54 billion came into the country in the form of economic aid and military spending. War-related industries sprouted and prospered: construction, logistics, and security. But that aid has done little to address the severe structural problems facing the Afghan economy. A new UN report shows that opium production soared to an all-time high this year, leading the head of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime to warn that without international support, without more meaningful assistance, this country may continue to evolve into a full-fledged narco state. But that aid is currently expected to decline as coalition forces depart. Relations between Afghanistan's President Hamid Karzai and the U.S. have been strained. And after 12 years of coalition efforts to rebuild the country, Karzai said in a recent interview that those efforts have failed.
On security front, the entire NATO exercise was one that caused Afghanistan a lot of suffering and a lot of loss of life, and no gains because the country is not secure.
Relations hit a new low earlier this year when protests broke out in response to reports that a U.S. Special Ops team had rounded up and executed 10 innocent Afghan civilians and buried their bodies outside a U.S. base west of Kabul. The unsubstantiated reports are the basis of a new piece in Rolling Stone entitled "The A-Team Killings" by Kabul-based reporter Matthew Akins, who spent 5 months interviewing witnesses and looking for answers. Rolling Stone's Matthew Akins joins us now. Matthew, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you in the U.S. Can you tell us what happened here, according to your reporting and investigating?
About a year ago, a U.S. Special Forces unit known as an A-Team showed up in this remote valley west of Kabul in Wardak province. And within a couple months, the locals started accusing them of murder, torture, the disappearances of 10 men, just extraordinary allegations that would amount to some of the worst war crimes committed by U.S. forces since 2001. Eventually, they were forced out because of these protests, but the whole incident remained shrouded in mystery. The U.S. military at the time denied any responsibility for these men's fate, even as their bodies turned up buried outside the base. Now, it's a remote area, dangerous, Taliban-controlled, difficult to access, but we spent the last 5 months getting to the bottom of it, and, in this investigation that we published in Rolling Stone, the current issue, we've assembled a damning dossier that suggests that these U.S. military forces were complicit in the gravest war crimes.
And it's worth noting the UN and the Red Cross investigations found U.S. involvement, quote, credible and may, as you said, amount to war crimes. You also note that these incidents don't occur in a vacuum. I mean, the idea that we have, human rights groups have repeatedly documented abuse of detainees in U.S. custody. This is something that has happened not just in this one isolated incident, but sort of throughout the history of the U.S. and Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely. This has to be seen in the context of things that began in 2001 at Bagram Airfield, where you had detainees dying in custody, that continued through Abu Ghraib, that's happened in repeated instances in both Afghanistan and Iraq, where prisoners have been abused, killed in custody, where U.S. forces have also turned a blind eye or even been willfully complicit in serious human rights abuses by their Afghan or Iraqi allies. And there's been no accountability for these incidents. So we've seen very few people go to jail or be held accountable, as numerous reports by the UN, by Congress, by the Red Cross have pointed out. So this really fits into that larger pattern.
Karen, we've talked about the armed services before, and we've talked about the war in the Middle East and the fact that nobody really actually talks about it. Part of the problem here in terms of transparency is there. Congratulations to Matthew, and we thank him for reporting and investigating and being, embedded over there, but there is not a huge discussion of what's going going on in the Middle East in the media.
Nope.
And I think in a way that has allowed certain things to happen, and we've gotten a free pass on things. We also, I think, have a strategy for drawdown that has been accepted by the American public, and we want our troops out. At the same time, the ramifications and the implications of no longer being there are fairly profound for the Afghan population. It is painful to listen to Hamid Karzai speak about our intervention there in those terms.
And I have to tell you, it's painful as somebody, I have somebody over there that I love dearly, and to think that he's wasted years of his life, and that's how Karzai feels. I mean,
and I think
it's terrible.
Yeah, the sacrifice of the American soldiers. Then you have that, Dave, which is under discussed. The bloodshed, the civilian casualties, the soldier casualties, the sacrifice that we have made in terms of blood and treasure. But then also the reality for people on the ground. And if there have been war crimes, an investigation of those, or some sort of groundswell of action in and around what exactly is going on in the Middle East, it doesn't exist.
There isn't much. I mean, we're already kind of in Washington, at least, focusing on the next war.
Yes.
To put it particularly, we're already talking about Iran. We're already talking about strategy there. When we do talk, there has been a sort of reawakening of discussions of drone usage and of actually the kind of completely invisible to most Americans actions being taken to take out targets with casualties that we would hear about if they were done by soldiers. So we're hearing a little bit more about the way the war on terror is being operated, but not as much about Afghanistan, which was not just expensive. That was supposed to be the answer to the reasons we were attacked on 9/11.
But we're a little bit complicit in the fact that when was the last time there was a protest about bringing the troops home? I'm not saying we're complicit in what happened in Wardak, and it is horrible. The point being, we're complicit in that we don't make it an issue. We don't say to our government, bring our troops home now. This is ridiculous. We're done. We're not doing this.
Or we want to know what the civilian casualties are in the drone strikes that we continue to conduct.
So if we don't do it, guess what? More of the same.
There's a reason it's called the Forgotten War. I think Americans almost don't remember that we're there. We so quickly pivoted over to Iraq and sort of forgot about that core mission in Afghanistan. It's just dragging on and on. I think most Americans just really wonder why we're even there.
I think we are complicit in what happened in Wardak. These are the soldiers that we sent out to fight our dirty war. The unit these U.S. Army Special Forces are from, the 3rd Special Forces Group in Fort Bragg, is the most heavily deployed unit in the Special Forces community. These men have been out for 10 deployments, some of the senior ones, and the toll they've suffered, the things that they've seen and done.
That's right.
I've been told by soldiers in the Special Forces community that they've really seen the weight of this war begin to, exercise its effect on the soldiers.
And they go and do it so we don't have to.
Well, right. I mean, that's also no wars without consequences. You can read the A-Team killings in the latest issue of Rolling Stone. Matthew Akins, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Coming up, Federal Reserve nominee Janet Yellen